dear students, dear gathered, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Indeed, a couple of weeks back, I met some second executives, and I asked them what they know about the NPP and its ideology. I was surprised when all executives could not share a meaningful understanding of our tradition. So when this invitation came for me to deliver a paper on this subject matter, I thought indeed that it was a godsend opportunity for me to share my own views on this matter. Let me thank our Council of Elders, former ministers of state, for their industry in making this document worthy of this evening's lecture. Our party's effort will be to liberate the energies of the people for the growth of a property-only democracy in this land, with a right to life, freedom and justice as principles for good government and laws of the land should be dedicated in order specifically to enrich life, property, and liberty of each and every citizen. These are the echoing words of Dr. Joseph Danquah. And it is upon these veritable words that I anchor today's lecture as I examine this vision and how it has shaped policy choices, influenced governance outcomes, and continue to guide our understanding of national development in the 4th Republic. I should focus on the Kufuor-Akufo-Addo government, their achievements within the context of the center-right ideology. By way of introduction, my dear distinguished ladies and gentlemen, and honored guests, I want to begin with a question. Not a complicated question, though, a simple one, which is, what is a political tradition for? Is it for the comfort of its members? Is it for the protection of its founders? Or is it for the liberation of its people? I ask these questions because there is a child that has followed the Danquah-Busia tradition like a shadow. That child has been repeated in newspapers, shouted at rallies, and whispered in classrooms. And that charge is this, that this tradition is elitist, that it belongs to educated few, that it was held by the privileged and runs in the interest of the privileged, that ordinary Ghanaians have no real place in its history. I want to face that charge directly today. It is judged by the direction of its policies. And when we look honestly at the direction of this tradition, from its founding thoughts to the government of President John Kufuor and President Danquah-Busia, we see something remarkable. We see a tradition that has consistently fought not to protect an elite, but to build a path that leads every Ghanaian into one. That is the argument I will make today. I will not make it with slogans. I will make it with facts, with policy, and with the lived experience of millions of Ghanaians whose lives were changed by government rooted in this tradition. So let us begin. First, I want to look at 3 traditions that we have known thus far. Before examining the Danquah-Busia tradition in depth and what it consciously rejects. To understand what this tradition stands for, you must also understand what it stands beside and what it stands against. Ghana's post-independence political history has been shaped in the main by 3 distinct political traditions. They have competed for power, traded places in government, and at times physically separated by one another. Each has left a mark on the country. It carries a set of ideas about how Ghana should be governed, how its economy should be organized, and what role the citizens should play in national life. It is not possible to make an honest case for any one of them without first understanding all three. So permit me to begin with the Nkrumah's tradition. The state as the engine of progress. That is what it says. Under Nkrumahism, its ideology is rooted in the political vision of Ghana's first president, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, and institutionalized through the Convention People's Party, which he founded in 1949. To understand Nkrumahism, you must understand the moment in which it emerged. Nkrumah arrived on the Gold Coast political scene at a time when the desire for immediate independence was burning with urgency. His response was a strategy of mass mobilization, direct action, and what he called positive action. Strikes, boycotts, and popular agitation designed to force the hand of the colonial administration. Ideologically, Nkrumah drew on African socialism, Pan-Africanism, and a deep belief that post-colonial states must take command of the national economy in order to direct it toward rapid development. The state, in Nkrumah's vision, was not really an enabler, it was a driver. State-owned enterprises, centralized economic planning, and the concentration of political authority in the ruling party and leader were the instruments through which this transformation would be achieved. Nkrumah believed that Africa's poverty was a result of colonial extraction, and that only a strong centralized African control state could reverse that damage by the speed the times demanded. In the First Republic, therefore, Nkrumah's CPP built roads, hospitals, universities, and dams. The Akuffo dam remains among his most enduring fiscal legacies. But the same period also saw the Preventive Detention Act of 1958, which allowed detention without trial. It saw the concentration of economic and political power in ways that removed checks and balances from the system. It saw independent institutions weakened and political opposition silenced. By 1964, Ghana had become a one-party state, with Nkrumah declared president for life. In February 1966, a military coup brought his government to an end while he was abroad. Nkrumahism has continued as a political tradition in Ghana through successor parties, most notably the People's National Party of the Third Republic, and element within the broader political formations that followed. Its emphasis is on central states, on Pan-African solidarity, and on a government-directed development model that has retained support among sections of the Ghanaian electorate, even as the limitations of state-led economic management have become clearer over time. The Rawlings era, his own input, populism, reform, and pragmatic reinvention. The Rawlings intervention, which occupies a distinct and complex space in Ghana's political history, is here for mention. It was born not from a founding intellectual vision, but from a military intervention. On June 4, 1979, Jerry John Rawlings led a coup that overthrew the military government of General Fred Akuffo. He handed power to an elected civilian government headed by President Hill Liman, but returned on December 31, 1981, with a second coup establishing the Provisional National Defense Council and banning all political parties. The PNDC era was defined by a combination of radical populist rhetoric and paradoxically the adoption of a neoliberal economic reform under pressure from the IMF and the World Bank. On one hand, the regime spoke the language of the revolutionary accountability, of holding corrupt and the so-called elites responsible of giving power to ordinary people and workers and people's defense committees. On the other hand, it implemented structural adjustment program that reduce state subsidies, liberalize trade, and privatize state assets. Policies more consistent with market economics than with socialist ideology. This tension between populist rhetoric and market-oriented practice defined the Rawlings era and made it difficult to place within any clean ideological category. When Ghana returned to multi-party democracy with the Constitution of 1992, Rawlings transformed the PNDC into the NDC, National Democratic Congress. The NDC became an institutional vehicle through which the Rawlings tradition entered the Fourth Republic. It drew on elements of Nkrumah's social policy, retained the loyalty of constituencies that are identified with the PNDC, and styled itself as a party of social democracy and inclusive governance. The NDC government from the 1993 to 2001 returned to power from 2001 to 2017 and has remained one of two of Ghana's dominant parties throughout the Fourth Republic. Its political identity has been shaped primarily by its opposition to the Danquah-Busia tradition and by the personal legacy of Jerry Rawlings, whose influence over the party endured until his death in November 2020. Now, the Danquah-Busia tradition, liberty, constitutionalism, and the empowered citizen. Ladies and gentlemen, this third tradition is the one this lecture is concerned with. The Danquah-Busia tradition, the liberal democratic center-right lineage that finds its modern expression in the new patriotic party. This tradition is the oldest organized political current in Ghana's history, tracing its roots to the United Gold Coast Convention, founded in 1947, and led by a group of national leaders later celebrated as a big six. It is a tradition grounded not in the power of the state, but in the dignity and freedom of the individual citizen. Indeed, it is a tradition that believes in humanity. Where Nkrumah's placed the state at the center of development, and the Rawlings tradition, I should say, blended populism with pragmatic economic management, the Danquah-Busia tradition placed the free, rights-bearing individual at the heart of the national projects. It championed constitutionalism and the rule of law from the very beginning, believing that durable independence required institutional depth, not merely political speed. It believed in the separation of powers, an independent judiciary, the protection of civil liberties as foundations without which no genuine development could be sustained. And it believed in a market-oriented economy in which citizens were empowered to own, to invest, and to build, rather than waiting on central state to distribute whatever it chose to give them. This tradition has survived military coups, detention, exile, electoral defeat, and sustained political persecution. Dr. J.B. Danquah died in St0rm prison in 1965, detained without trial by the very state he had helped to found. Professor K.A. was overthrown in a military coup in 1972 and died in exile. Chief S.D. Dombo was jailed for his political convictions, and yet the tradition endured, re-emerging after every suppression, because its ideas were rooted in something deeper than personal ambition or the machinery of state power. They were rooted in a conviction about the nature of human dignity that could not be imprisoned or exiled. In the Fourth Republic, established by the 1992 Constitution, this tradition found its permanent institutional hold in the NPP, founded on 28 July 1992. The NPP has governed Ghana from 2001 to 2009 under President John Kufuor, and from 2017 to 2025 under President Danquah-Busia. Together, those 16 years of democratic government provide the clearest empirical test of what this tradition produces when it is given the opportunity to govern. Now let me take you through what distinguishes these traditions and deal with a side-by-side summary. Ladies and gentlemen, from what I've told you so far, there are three ideologies. In many ways, I see these as very fundamental and not just cosmetic. They are not simply three flowers of the same thing. They represent genuinely different answers to the most important question in politics. On the question of economic organization, the compromising federal state ownership and centralized planning. The Rawlings idea practiced a mix of populist rhetoric and market-oriented structural adjustment. The Danquah-Busia tradition, the center-right ideology, has consistently favored a private sector-led economy, with the state acting as an enabler, a regulator, and a provider of social infrastructure, rather than as an owner or controller of productive activity. On the question of political authority, compromising in practice moved toward a one-party state and the suppression of dissent. The Rawlings tradition came to power through military force on two separate occasions and governed for more than a decade without democratic accountability. The tradition has never seized power by force. It has won it at the ballot box, accepted electoral defeat when it occurred, and remained consistently committed to constitutional governance, multi-party democracy, and peaceful transfer of power. That is the Danquah-Busia tradition. On the question of what drives national development, Compromising said the state drives it. Rawlings said a combination of state management and intellectual financial discipline drives it. The Danquah-Busia tradition says the liberalized citizen drives it. Free individuals, equipped with education, protected by law, and empowered to own and build, generate the productive energy that transforms a nation. These are not small differences. They are differences that have produced different kinds of governments, different institutional outcomes, and different consequences for the lives of ordinary Ghanaians. With that context firmly in place, I now proceed to examine the tradition at the center of this lecture in its full historical text. First of all, I ask, where did this tradition come from? I submit that this tradition was born in the fight for the ordinary people. To understand any political tradition, you must go back to the conditions that gave birth to it. And when you go back to the origins of the tradition, you do not find a group of privileged men sitting in a comfortable room protecting their interests. You find a fight, a hard, costly, principled fight for the rights of ordinary Ghanaians. Before J.B. Danquah was ever a politician, he was a lawyer. And one of the most important things he did as a lawyer was to fight for the cocoa farmers, just as his young MPs are fighting for cocoa farmers in Parliament today. J.B. Danquah fought in the courts, case by painstaking case, for producers to receive fair prices for their work. The people of his time gave him a name for this. They called him the Kufuor. It means the lamb of farmers. This was not the reputation of a man who had turned his back on the people. This was a man who used every tool available to him in service of the people. And go back further. The Aborigines Right Protection Society, the organization that shaped the political consciousness of the generation before Danquah, existed for one reason. It existed to protect the land rights of ordinary Ghanaians against colonial confiscation. The fight for property ownership was never, in this tradition, a fight for the rich to accumulate more. It was a fight for ordinary people to hold on to what was already theirs. This is the foundation of what Danquah later called the property-owning democracy. And we must clear those words carefully. Not a democracy of property owners, meaning those who already have, but a property-owning democracy, meaning a society in which every citizen has a real path to becoming an owner, a stakeholder, a builder of something of their own. Danquah said it himself. He wrote that every citizen of the land is an audition, a royal of the land, and must therefore be equipped with the capacity to climb the ladder of prosperity and own a piece of land for themselves. That is not elitism. That is the most democratic vision imaginable. Hear him again, quote, "Our party's effort will be to liberate the energy of the people for the growth of a property-owning democracy in this land." Now let me turn to Chief Dombo, the man the elitist label cannot explain. But let me take you now to this man's life, and that destroys the elitist label completely. He was a traditional chief from Guri in the Northern Territories. He was not a product of European universities. He was not a man of inherited wealth. He was a Northern leader who understood from the deep personal experience what it meant to be left behind by a system that did not see you. Dombo founded the Northern People's Party in April 1954 because he could see that the political movement of the South, however well-intentioned, were not speaking for the North. He fought to bring the people of the Northern Territories into the national conversation. And when opposition forces came together in 1957 to form the United Party, it was a coalition that included Northern voices, Asante voices, the Muslim voices, and voices from Togoland. It was a declaration that this tradition belongs to all Ghanaians. Now consider what Dombo gave up for his convictions. He served as a leader of the opposition. He would have traded that position for comfort. He would have accepted the offers that that power always makes to those willing to bend their principles. But he did not. He was jailed for his activism. He refused bribes. He rejected every invitation to cross the carpet. The most demanding form of service to the ordinary. Now I turn to Professor Busia, the scholar who works for the poor. Professor Busia, he studied at Oxford. Yes, he wrote with precision and intellectual depth, but pushed aside the university and asked what education was used for. As Prime Minister, Professor Busia made rural development a central pillar of national policy, not as a talking point, but as a practical path to spreading Ghana's wealth to the communities that had never seen it. His administration believed that development had to reach the countryside, the smallholder, the person who has never sat in a classroom. And when his health was failing, when he was far from home in Oxford, the accounts of those who knew him are consistent. He was consumed by the plight of the poor and afflicted in Ghana, not by his legacy, not by his academic reputation, by the people. Danquah himself died not as a wealthy man. He died in detention, in prison, a prisoner of the state he had helped to build, because he refused to stop speaking the truth. These are not the lives of men who built a tradition to protect their privilege. These are the lives of men who use whatever privilege they had as a tool in the service of something larger than themselves. Now let me confront elitism boldly. People have criticized the tradition to be elitist. I would want at this point to face that charge boldly and honestly. And honesty requires me to acknowledge what is true in it. The founders of this tradition were to produce results that benefit those who already have advantage. That is, but here is where the critique goes wrong. It confuses the ideology with saying some of the application of its applications. It mistakes the principles of the tradition for the imperfect word of any particular movement. And most critically, it ignores the actual evidence of what governments rooted in this tradition have done when they govern Ghana. The real goal, let's tear down the walls, not building them. The vision of the property-owning democracy was never about protecting those who already had property. It was about making property accessible to those who did not. It was about transforming Ghanaians from passive spectators in the economy into participants and owners. My own definition of capitalism is simple. It is the capacity to capitalize on economic opportunities in a developing nation like ours, that is, regardless of their background, can access opportunity. The goal of this strategy the Kufuor administration, which built the foundation upon which the Akufo-Addo administration proceeded to transform. What did Kufuor inherit and what did he build? When John Kufuor took office in January 2001, he inherited a Ghana in a serious difficulty. The economy was under severe strain. Institutional decay was visible in every sector. And in the health sector system, a cruel arrangement called cash and carry meant that a sick Ghanaian who could not pay should simply stay home and die. Let alone, my dear students who are young. When the family had no money in those days, the child did not receive medical care. What did this supposedly elitist tradition do in the face of reality? I will tell you in a moment. I will not speak in generalities. I will speak in specifics. One, the National Health Insurance Scheme. The Kufuor administration response to this cash and carry was to introduce the National Health Insurance Scheme. The critics said it was impossible. Some on the other side of political aisle said it would not work. They even proposed a one-time premium as the alternative, which every serious analyst recognized as unworkable. Again, this government, the party accused of elitism, removed the financial barrier between a sick Ghanaian and the health care that they needed. But think of what this means in practice. A woman in a rural community does not have to watch her child suffer because she cannot afford hospital bills. A man does not have to choose between buying food and buying medicine. The NHIS was not a charity. It was an investment in the capacity of the Ghanaian people to be healthy, productive, and able to build lives for themselves. Health is not a side issue in property-owning democracy. You cannot own anything if illness has taken everything from you. You cannot build a business if preventable sickness keeps you from working. The NHIS strengthened the foundation on which individual effort is stand. The free compulsory basic education, school feeding, and the next generation. Again, John Kufuor did something very remarkable. His intervention, they were acts of constitutional obedience. Article 251, compulsory and available to all. Not available to those families who can afford it. Not available in principle while unaffordable in practice, but available to all. The Kufuor government took that constitutional mandate seriously and did the practical work of turning it into reality. The capitation grant, introduced in 2005, eliminated direct fees at the basic school level, providing funding directly to schools to cover the development levies that had previously been charged to the families. The effect was immediate and measurable. School enrollment rose by 2008. The gains were most significant for girls and for children in rural communities, the very children most likely to have been turned away before. These were not abstract statistics. Each percentage point represented thousands of children who were now in the classroom instead of being left outside. But the administration understood something important. Removing fees was necessary, but it was not sufficient. A child who arrives at school hungry cannot learn. A family that needs a child to work in order to survive will eventually pull that child out of school, regardless of fees. The school feeding program, therefore, was launched in 2005 and reached over 500,000 pupils across all 10 regions of Ghana by 2009. Tackled both those realities directly. It provided one hot nutritional meal each school day to children in public, kindergarten, and primary schools, particularly in low-income and rural communities. It reduced the cost burden on poor families. It gave children a reason to stay in school, and in communities where children were being kept home to help with subsistence farming or petty trading, the meal provided a genuine incentive that parents could weigh against opportunity costs of sending a child to school. Together, the capitation grant and the school feeding program gave real practical meaning to free compulsory universal basic education. They did not just remove the fees, they addressed the three most common reasons a poor child leaves school: the cost of attendance, the hunger as a barrier to learning, and the economic pool of child labor. All three barriers addressed at the same time through the same government, which is often called an elitist government. That is not the action of a party that governs for the comfortable. That is constitutional equity put into practice. That is the property-owning democracy, beginning where it must always begin, with a child in a classroom, nourished and present, ready to learn. Public transport system and agriculture. The metro mass system, called Kufuor bus, as it came to be called, may not sound dramatic, but for the trader who could not afford to get to market, for the student who no longer lost half of the day getting to school, it was a practical change in their daily life. Affordable transport lowers the cost of economic activity. It is exactly the kind. In agriculture, the administration undertook major reforms in the cocoa sector, providing free fertilizers and improved seedlings to farmers. This was deeply consistent with the tradition's founding philosophy. Danquah himself has spent his legal career fighting for fair treatment of cocoa farmers against a colonial system that extracted their surplus. The Kufuor government, therefore, continued that fight in a new era, supporting farmers with inputs and better pricing. He didn't reduce the price per bag. The result was significant growth in cocoa production, higher income for farming families, and stronger rural economies. And when President Kufuor declared a golden age of business, he was sending a clear message. A government that is not the owner of Ghana's economy, but the citizens are. The private sector is an engine. The individual initiative is the foundation. The administration worked to create a regulatory environment in which Ghanaian entrepreneurs could build, invest, and grow. This inspired renewed confidence and attracted many Ghanaians from the diaspora to come home and invest in the country. I am a living example of that initiative. Discovery of oil, the opportunity, and the property-owning economy. No account of Kufuor's years will be complete without speaking about one of the most consequential developments in Ghana's modern economic history, the discovery of oil. And that story, properly told, is itself a demonstration of what this tradition means in practice. From 2001, the Kufuor administration set about stabilizing Ghana's economy under the heat. This was a deliberate signal to the world that Ghana was a serious, stable, and rule-governed place in which capital could be committed and contract could be trusted. That signal had consequences far beyond what any single policy announcement could achieve. One of those consequences was the repositioning of Ghana National Petroleum Corporation as an active commercial partner rather than a passive regulatory body. The administration worked to create a legal and institutional environment that invited international oil companies to bring their capital, their technology, and their expertise to Ghana's offshore waters. Cosmos Energy and Tullow Oil signed key petroleum agreements with Ghana in 2004. 3 years later, in 2007, during the final year of President Kufuor's tenure, those companies discovered the Jubilee field. It was one of most significant offshore discoveries in West Africa in a generation. President Kufuor's response to the discovery was characteristically direct. He framed it not as a windfall for governments, but as a transformational opportunity for the Ghanaian people. Oil, he said, was money for schools, roads, and hospitals. He spoke of Ghana becoming an Africa tiger. These were not empty phrases. They reflected an explicit developmental reading of the find that natural resources wealth, properly managed within a democratic framework and directed towards social investment, could accelerate the property-owning democracy that this tradition had always sought to build. The ideological consistency deserves emphasis. I repeat, the ideological to oil and the Kufuor was not state capture of a natural resources. It was a market-oriented strategy in which the government created the conditions, established the institutional framework, and positioned GMPC as a credible commercial partner, while private companies provided the risk capital and technical expertise. The state cleared the path. The spares private actors drove the discovery. The anticipated wealth was going to flow through transparent and democratically governed revenue management into the social investment that would broaden opportunity for all Ghanaians. This stands in direct contrast to more resource nationalist approaches to petroleum governance, in which the state seeks to dominate production by revenue. The Kufuor government favored investment-friendly contracts that prioritize attracting foreign capital and technology, integrating GMPC as a commercial participant rather than asserting outright state control. Full petroleum revenue management legislation matured after Kufuor, but the philosophical and institutional groundwork was laid on his watch. That groundwork reflected a consistent belief that wealth is created most reliably not by a state that seizes productive assets, but by a state that creates the conditions in which free, well-regulated private enterprise can find and develop them. In this sense, the Jubilee Field discovery was not merely an economic event, it was an ideological proof of concept, I so submit. Institutionally credible democratic government can attract when it governs well. It showed that the property-owning democracy is not only a vision for individual citizens. It is a framework for how a nation as a whole can earn its place in the global economy through sound governance, transparent institutions, and a commitment to private sector-led growth. And finally, protecting the most vulnerable, the Kufuor administration introduced the LEAD program. In 2008, the Livelihood Empowerment Against Poverty program was introduced. This was a targeted cash transfer to the poorest households, the elderly without family support, people with severe disabilities, and orphans and vulnerable children. Some may ask whether a cash transfer program fits within center-right political talks. The answer is clear. The NPP's own creed states plainly that there will always be those who are unable to provide for themselves, and that society has a responsibility to protect them. The League was that protection in action. It was not about creating dependency. It was about ensuring that the most vulnerable members of society were not abandoned. That extreme poverty did not become a permanent trap with no exit. A tradition that truly believes in the dignity of every citizen cannot look away from those citizens who need direct health support. Lee showed that this tradition does not look away. Now let me turn to the Nana and Danquah-Busia administration. The scaling of the vision. When President Nana and Danquah-Busia took office in January 2017, the ideological threat from the Kufuor years remained unbroken. The context, however, was different. The world was entering into a period of extraordinary disruption with the COVID-19 pandemic Akufo-Addo administration too. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, according to GES records in Parliament, 3,406,172 Ghanaian youths benefited from free SHS and TVETs between 2017 and 2020. Through this initiative, Ghanaians gained access to secondary education through free senior high school policy. Those who wanted vocational training also have access. And just for the avoidance of doubt, let me, as I always do, use myself as an example. When I was done with my BEC in 1994, and results finally came, and I qualified for St0rm. It took the intervention of my friends from rich homes to inform their parents to contribute for my admission fee. But I know that many of my colleagues who also had distinction but had no funds from their families did not afford, and they stayed at home. In final year in St0rm, I nearly became a dropout. took back the singles, which I had to compete for and win to get me out of secondary school. And I know thousands, if not millions, of Ghanaians lost opportunities to have secondary education because their parents could not afford. Ladies and gentlemen, before secondary education became free, it was practically a privilege, not legal, not formal, but practically, I dare submit. The fees were manageable for a family in a comfortable neighborhood in Accra. For a smallholder farmer's family in the Volta region, they were often out of reach. The brilliant child of a poor parent sat at home. The less gifted child of a wealthy parent went to school. That was Ghana's reality. Free SHS changed that reality. And look at what followed. Streetism declined. Child labor fell. Teenage pregnancy dropped in communities where girls were now in schools instead of being pushed out of it. Young people who are traditionally been pulled into early domestic service stayed in classrooms instead. The difficulty of finding young domestic workers that some people complain about was not a social problem, it was a social progress. Crucially, the policy did not only remove tuition fees, it expanded public responsibility for feeding in senior high schools. Feeding was extended across SHS under the program, and even day students were provided meals in schools. This significantly reduced the financial burden on families and ensured that students could remain in school without worrying about daily food costs. In the words of the tradition's own vision, education is the primary instrument through which individuals develop their talents, enhance their productivity, and gain the capacity to participate meaningfully in economic life. Free SHS is not a departure from the center-right philosophy. It is its most powerful practical expression. It says to every Ghanaian child, your background does not determine your ceiling, your efforts and talents do. There can be no reversal of free SHS and free TVET without reversing the progress made in social mobility, in youth development, and in Ghana's national human capital. That is not a political statement. It is a statement of plain developmental arithmetic. Now let me turn to technical education, STEM, and the skills economy. The Akufo-Addo administration understood that in the modern economy, degrees and technical skills must work together. Therefore, 34 new TVET institutions were established. 62 existing ones were upgraded. 20 STEM cells were built. 10 model STEM secondary high schools were created. 186 modern science laboratories were constructed across the country. In my own constituency in Kufuor, the Winneba NPP tells a story that speaks for many institutions across Ghana. For decades, it operated with outdated machines and inadequate equipment. But under Akufo-Addo, it received a modern ICT center, new training equipment, new hostels, new admin block, and new classrooms with furniture. This is what will excite you. Through these investments, the confidence level in technical education grew, and the number of enrollments increased from 147 in 2017 to 3,486 by 2024. Those in doubt may go to Winneba Vocational Training Institute and check the records for themselves. Young people who have been told by years of underinvestment that vocational training was second-rate discovered that it was in fact a serious and promising path. This is a tradition at its most forward-looking, equipping Ghanaians with skills the market actually needs, treating every young person as a potential innovator, not a potential dependent, preparing Ghana for the fourth industrial revolution, in which, as has been rightly observed, digital assets can do more to democratize property ownership than physical land. Now let me turn to his 1D1F policy, spreading opportunity across Ghana. The One District, One Factory initiative represents the clearest expression of the Danquah-Busia tradition belief in a private sector-led development, supported but not supplanted by the states. The 1D1F was a deliberate attempt to democratize industrial capitalism by extending productive opportunity beyond traditional urban centers. Rather than centralizing industrial growth in Accra and a few metropolitan enclaves, the policy sought to anchor economies into national and global value chains. By providing incentives, credit facilitation, and infrastructure support, the state acted as an enabler of enterprise, not its owner. This approach aligns squarely with the center-right ideology. The state creates conditions for production, while individuals and firms generate value. As an extension of Ghana's broader industrial transformation agenda, the 1D1F aimed to decentralize production, create jobs, and add value to locally available raw materials across the country's districts. By the end of 2023, the data shows that there were about 321 1D1F projects at various stages of implementation, with 169 factories operational and 152 under construction. In the same period, the program had generated approximately 169,870 direct and indirect jobs, not 1 million jobs. The initiative sought to shift Ghana's industrial landscape away from raw material export dependency towards value addition and manufacturing at district levels. This meant supporting enterprises in agro-processing, manufacturing of goods, and other industrial outputs. Through tax and duty incentives, the 1D1F encouraged private sector investment in district-level industrial ventures, thus broadening economic activity beyond urban centers. In terms of geographic coverage, the program had reached 142 districts across all 16 regions of Ghana by 2024, amounting to about 54% of all districts. Labor transformation to meet national development is very crucial for a laissez-faire economy, and initiatives like 1D1F plays a key role in driving this change. The socio-economic impact of 1D1F lies in its emphasis on job creation, skill acquisition, and local wealth transformation. In ideological terms, I submit that the policy sought to expand the property-owning democracy envisioned by Danquah by transforming citizens from economic spectators into participants in productive enterprise. Let me proceed to agriculture, the Planting for Food and Jobs initiative, dignity, real dignity for the Ghanaian farmer. Under the Planting for Food and Jobs, this initiative, which came in the early days of the Akufo-Addo administration, clearly reflect a similar ideological logic applied to agriculture. PFJ created over 2 million jobs, beginning with 745,000 in 2017, rising to 794,944 in 2018, and 746,848 in 2019, demonstrating steady large-scale participation in the program. PFJ redefined agriculture by shifting from subsistence support to productivity-driven empowerment. Through subsidized inputs, extension services, and guaranteed markets, the policy aimed to make farming a commercially viable and dignified economic activity, particularly for smallholder farmers. From a center-right perspective, PFJ was about unlocking individual productive capacity in rural Ghana, increase yields, improve food security, and reduce import dependence, translated directly into higher income and economic resilience for farming households. The program's impact extended beyond individual farmers, as several public and state institutions benefited from its output and supply chain. By restoring agriculture as a pathway to prosperity rather than survival, the PFJ reinforced the traditional center-right ideology that development begins with the liberation of the individual efforts. Now, Agenda 111, a major investment in healthcare infrastructure. Agenda 111 was a major commitment to build 101 district hospitals across the country, extending quality healthcare to communities that have lived without it for far too long. When there is no hospital in your district, illness is not just a health problem. It is an economic catastrophe. People lose working hours. Families spend money they do not have on transport to distant facilities. Communities become reluctant to attract investment. The Agenda 111 began rewriting the geography of health access in Ghana. In all humility, I submit that to realize this dream, the current administration must do all within this power to continue these projects and ensure that they are commissioned. It is Ghana's dream. Now, let me turn to the Ghana card. In 2017, President Danquah-Busia decisively revived and accelerated the process, continued and completed what had been initiated earlier under John Kufuor's administration. The National Identification Authority was retooled and re-energized, and a robust biometric identification system was deployed, anchored on uniqueness, credibility, and interoperability. The Ghana card emerged not just as a physical document, but as a secure and singular identity verification instrument that prevents impersonation, eliminates duplication, and enables efficient access to both public and private services. It is important to acknowledge that the intellectual and policy push for integrating national identity with financial systems gained renewed momentum under the stewardship of Nana Akufo, who consistently articulated the link between formal identification, credit access, and economic inclusion. His government's advocacy for biometric identity integrated into banking, mobile money interoperability, and public service delivery, built upon the original institutional framework established during the Kufuor era. The Ghana card transformed identity into a platform for opportunity by integrating citizens into formal systems such as banking, telecommunication, taxation, pensions, healthcare, and public service delivery. The Ghana card strengthened financial inclusion, improved transparency, and enhanced institutional efficiency. Significantly, The Ghana card has evolved into a multifunctional national document, serving as an electronic passport and integrated with the National Health Insurance Scheme as NHIS card, thereby simplifying identification and service access for citizens. It has secured verification mechanism which has reduced fraud, minimized leakages, and reinforced national security through reliable authentication. Between 2017 and 2024, the revitalization of the National Identification Project by President Danquah-Busia consolidated Ghana's digital transformation agenda and laid a durable foundation for inclusive growth. By completing what had begun in 2003, the administration reinforced the principle that sustained development, which requires strong institutions, credible systems, and empowered citizens capable of driving national progress. From a center-right perspective, rooted in the Danquah-Busia tradition, the national identification system embodies principles of empowering the individual within rules-based market economy. A secure legal identity is foundational to participation in property-owning democracy. It allows citizens to open bank accounts, access credits, register businesses, acquire property, pay taxes, and transact with confidence. The Ghana card also serves as a foundational pillar of modern governance, national security, and economic participation. By capturing unique fingerprints, iris scans, and verified personal data, it has eliminated identity duplication and helped the banks to build a strong KYC process, improve border security in collaboration with Ghana Immigration Service, and reinforce transparency in social intervention programs, thereby institutionalizing accountability, reducing criminal anonymity, and advancing a rule-based, digitally integrated property-owning democracy anchored in secure legal identity. Now let me ask and pose this to you. Why social intervention is not a contradiction to our ideology? Many have asked, particularly our critics of this tradition, they sometimes pose this question. And indeed, I agree with them, it is fair to question. If this center-right tradition committed to market and individual enterprise should at all build health insurance schemes, and why at all should it fund school feeding program, and why should it construct hospitals and factories, and even provide free SHs? The answer is straightforward, and it rests on an honest understanding of what Ghana actually is. A developed economy with broad access to education, health, and economic infrastructure can argue about how much the state should step back and let the market run. That argument has its place in those contexts, even if it is contested. But Ghana is not in that position. In Ghana, market cannot function efficiently when large sections of the population lack access to basic education. You cannot have a competitive labor market when workers are chronically ill. You cannot have a dynamic business class when talented children are excluded from secondary school because of fees. You cannot have functioning property rights when people lack a recognized legal identity. Therefore, the social intervention programs of Kufuor and Akufo-Addo were not departures from the center-right tradition. They were the application of the tradition to the real conditions of a developing economy. They removed the barriers that prevented ordinary Ghanaians from accessing the markets. They built the human capital without which market participation is impossible. They extended the infrastructure of opportunity to those whom the market, in its current form, could not reach. This is not a contradiction. It is the most coherent expression of the tradition's core belief that human beings, given the conditions to develop their capabilities and exercise their freedom, will generate prosperity that spreads outward. Redistribution without production is temporary. Empowerment through production is lasting. A nation cannot give what it does not produce. Only a productive society can sustain social protection and lift the vulnerable out of poverty. The Kufuor and Akufo-Addo administrations show that the tradition is a living philosophy, not a rigid doctrine. It adapts to the demands of the moment without surrendering its core commitment to liberty, enterprise, and the dignity of all citizens. Now, the deeper argument. There is a deeper argument where the citizen is placed. I want to address one more dimension of this tradition because it gets to the heart of what distinguishes it from the alternatives. The divergence between J.P. Danquah and Nkrumah is often told as a story about personalities or about the speed of independence. That telling is incomplete. The real divergence was about something more fundamental. It was about where you place the agent of development. Nkrumah placed the states at the center. The center will plan. The state will own. The state will direct the economy towards development. But the record shows it limits. When the state holds producer prices below market level to finance central projects, farmers eventually reduce their efforts. Innovation stalls and productivity falls. Development built on the weakening of those who generate primary wealth cannot sustain itself. But our tradition places individual citizens at the center, not because it does not believe in its collective progress, but because we understand that collective progress is built from the sum of individual efforts, each free to be creative, each rewarded for their contribution. We place the farmer, the entrepreneur, the professional, and the artisan at the heart of the nation's story. The cocoa sector reforms under Kufuor, providing free input and improving pricing for farmers. He did not give haircut to cocoa farmers. This was a direct continuation of Danquah's fight as a Kufuor 60 years earlier. The thread is unbroken. The conviction is the same. The producer has rights. The worker has dignity. The citizen is not a means to the state's end. The state is a means to the citizen's flourishing. Now, why these principles matter more than ever? We live in a time of rapid and disorienting change. Artificial intelligence is reshaping what kinds of work will exist in 10 years. Climate change is rewriting the conditions of agriculture. Global economy is shifting in ways that no single government can fully control. And across Africa, a rising generation is hungry for answers and deeply skeptical of political traditions that have not been delivered. In this context, I want to argue that the principles of the Danquah-Busia tradition that are not relics of the past. They are agencies of the present. Individual freedom, the freedom to think, to create, to own, and to build, is the engine of adaptation. No central planner can anticipate the specific skills and innovation that Ghana will need to thrive in the next decade. Only free individuals operating within well-built institutions can generate that kind of adaptive capacity. The rule of law and constitutional governance, the foundation that Danquah fought for from his first days as a lawyer, are the precondition for sustainable investment. No business builds where contract cannot be enforced. No entrepreneur invests where property cannot be taken without legal protection. The institutions that protect liberty also protect prosperity. And the vision of the property-owning democracy, a Ghana in which every citizen has a real stake in national story, addresses the central challenge of our time. The gain of economic growth, if left unguided, tend to concentrate. They flow to those who already have access to education, to capital, and to networks. The deliberate work of expanding access through free SHS, through TVET, through the Ghana Card, through the district hospitals and rural factories, is the work of ensuring that growth does not leave the majority behind. In the fourth industrial revolution, as has been rightly observed by Gabi Asariwa-Chikako, the executive head of African Prosperity Network, digital access can contribute faster and more broadly to democratizing property ownership than physical land alone. A young Ghanaian who masters a digital skill, who builds a product that reaches the global market, who participates in information economy, can become a property owner through talent and effort rather than inheritance. That is the property-owning democracy updated for our time. This tradition has the intellectual resources to meet these challenges. The question is whether we will claim those resources, articulate them clearly, and carry them forward with the moral seriousness that our founders showed. Now let's relate this principle to artificial intelligence and the digital opportunity it brings. There's a new frontier for an old vision. I want to pause here and speak directly to the young Ghanaians, the students who are in this auditorium and beyond. Because what I'm about to say concerns your future more than it concerns anyone else. For generations, property in Ghana meant land. It meant a plot in your hometown, a building in the city, a farm inherited from your father. And because land was difficult to access, because title registration was slow and complicated and often subjected to disputes, property remained out of reach for most people. The barriers were physical, they were legal, they were financial. And for many ordinary Ghanaians, those barriers defined the ceiling on what was possible. But something historic is happening in your time, and it is happening fast. The world is entering an era in which property itself has been redefined. In the fourth industrial revolution, digital assets can contribute faster and more broadly to democratizing property ownership than physical land over ever could. A software application is property. A digital property platform is property. A brand built online is property. Intellectual content, code, data, creating work distributed across the internet, all of it is now property. And unlike a plot of land, none of it requires a title deed. None of it requires proximity to a city. None of it requires inherited capital. It requires one thing above all others. It requires a trained, capable, and rated human mind. This is why the investment made under Akufo-Addo in education, in TVET, and in STEM are not merely educational policy. They are economic policy. They are a social policy. They are, in the deepest sense, property policy. They are the deliberate preparation of a generation to seize ownership in a new world where the barriers to entry are lower than they have ever been, provided you have the knowledge and the skill to walk through the door. ladies and gentlemen, the critics have received an answer. Remember the accusation I just said that I've been addressing throughout this lecture. The accusation that this tradition serves the privilege, that this builds walls rather than ladders, that it speaks to those who have already arrived and has nothing to say to those still on the journey. Let me answer that in the language of digital age, founded on the very initiative of Nana Akufo-Addo. In cyberspace, your father's income does not determine your ranking. In cyberspace, your village does not restrict your markets. In cyberspace, you, the young man in Bogatanga, and the young woman in Afao can compete for the same clients, build the same products, and the same income. The internet does not ask where you come from. It asks what you can do. And what you can do is directly determined by what you were taught. This is the answer to those who say that this tradition does not care about the poor. We are equipping the poor with the most powerful tool, the modern economy offers. We are giving them education. We are giving them skills. We are giving them access to digital frontier, where the barriers that have historically blocked ordinary Ghanaians from prosperity simply does not exist in the same way. We are offering the child of poverty a small version of the same old economy. We are offering them entry into an entirely new one. The property-owning democracy of J.B. Danquah was not a vision limited to physical assets. Danquah understood that the liberation of economic energy begins with the liberation of human capacity. He wrote that every citizen must be equipped with the capacity to climb the ladder of prosperity. And in 1947, that ladder was rooted in land, in commerce, in professional life. But in 2025, that ladder rises through fiber optic cables and satellite signals into a global digital economy worth trillions of dollars. The vision is the same. The ladder has simply grown taller, and a government that truly believes in that vision must make sure every young Ghanaian can reach the first ladder. So, free SHS can directly be linked to a digital economy. Acquiring TV skills can directly be linked to a digital world that actually pays for a young one who has acquired the skill. STEM education, which builds on Ghana's next generation of innovators, answers the question. And there is no doubt on my mind that the initiative to have science, technology, engineering, and mathematics in place was the best ever to be initiated to prepare our children for the digital age. These are the languages in which the 21st century conducts its most consequential conversations. Artificial intelligence runs on mathematics. The software that powers global commerce is written in programming language rooted in logic and computer science. Biotechnology that will reshape healthcare is built on biology and chemistry. The engineer who designs the infrastructure of tomorrow needs physics and applied mathematics from as early as secondary school. The Akufo-Addo administration established 20 STEM centers across the country, built 10 model STEM senior high schools, and constructed the 186 modern science laboratories, all to prepare our children for the future. The STEM Academy in Accra, as a flagship institution designed to develop world-class science talent from Ghana. These institutions teach students coding, robotics, and emerging technologies. They are designed to produce not just graduates who can fill existing jobs, but innovators who can create new ones. Think about what this means for a young Ghanaian born in poverty. Before STEM education was expanded and made accessible, the path from poverty to participation in global technology economy was extremely narrow. It required a combination of fortunate circumstances, a school with good science teachers, a family that could afford university, access to computers. Most poor Ghanaian families could not reliably supply all those conditions. The STEM expansion under Akufo deliberately changed that equation. It brought back facilities, the teachers, and the curriculum to young people who previously had no part to them. The initiative did not only train workers, it trained owners, because the young Ghanaian who learns to build artificial intelligence tools today is not destined to work for someone else's technology company. They are positioned to build their own, and when they do, they will own it. That ownership is property. That company is an asset. That income is wealth, and none of it requires a plot of land or a bank loan secured against inherited collateral. It requires knowledge. It requires skill. It requires the kind of education that Akufo-Addo administration made it a national priority to provide. Let me there submit further that the Kufuor-Addo administration fulfilled a bold vision. Not because every policy was perfect, not because every challenge was solved, but because in the most important area of all, the Akufo-Addo administration made a decision that this country needed someone to make. He decided that Ghana's young people deserve to be educated, not some of them, not the ones whose parents could afford it, but all of them, every single one of them. When he made secondary education free, he told every family in Ghana, your child belongs to a classroom. When he expanded TVET, he told every young person who was not destined for a university degree, your skills have value, and we will develop them. When he built STEM centers and science laboratories, he told Ghanaian youth the technological future is not just for other countries. It is for you. You are capable of building it. We will give you the tools. The critic of elitism says this tradition does not see the poor child. I said, look at the record. The Akufo-Addo administration saw the poor child so clearly that it built an entire national education architecture around the conviction that this child must not be left behind. Not because it was politically convenient, not because the numbers were easy to justify in a budget under pressure, but because the tradition founding philosophy demands it. Because J.B. Danquah said, every citizen is an audition, a royal of the land, and must be equipped to climb the ladder. Because the property-owning democracy was never a vision for the few. It was always a vision for every single Ghanaian. The young Ghanaian today, who has gone through free SHS, who has acquired skill through a well-resourced TVET institution, who has been taught coding and robotics in a center, is not a passive recipient of charity. They are a prepared citizen of the digital world. They are positioned to become an owner, a builder, a creator of wealth, not just for themselves, but for the communities around them. They are the property owners of democracy, walking, breathing, and owning a laptop. This is the vision of our tradition. We boldly acted on it. That is the legacy that must be protected, continued, and built upon. And that is why the work of this tradition is not finished. It is only beginning. Chairman, Excellency, colleagues from Parliament, elders of our party, ladies and gentlemen, and students, let me come to a close. In conclusion of my submission, I say that our tradition and its values are not mere slogans. We must not allow people to repeat without examining what it means. Such an approach will amount to disservice to the tradition. It is a disservice to the tradition. It is a disservice to Ghana. And it is, I say, this from the very depth of my commitment to this cause, a disservice to the truth. I am arguing today that this tradition was never elitist in the harmful sense that its critics claim. It was born in the fight, it was born out of the fight for farmers' land rights. It was carried by a northern chief who refused a bribe and went to jail for his people. It was shaped by a prime minister who lay dying far from home with his mind on his people, the poor people of Ghana. It was expressed in governance through the largest health insurance scheme in Ghana's history, through the most transformative free education policy ever implemented, through rural industrialization that reached 142 districts, and through agricultural support that created almost 2 million jobs. These are not the achievements of a tradition indifferent to ordinary people. These are the achievements of a tradition that has consistently tried to make ordinary people extraordinary. To the scholars and students in this room today, engage with the founding text of this tradition. Study the governance record honestly. Understand the philosophical roots. Then bring your own critical intelligence to bear. Agree to disagree, but engage with the real thing, not with the caricature. To every young Ghanaian thinking about what kind of future is possible, you are the generation that will decide whether Ghana follows the path of empowered citizenship or money dependence. You will decide whether your own children grow up in a country where talent and effort determine destiny, or one where the family you were born into determines it. This tradition I have spoken of today is a tradition that embraces diversity. It is the reason why I, a son of an Anglo and an Ifutu mother, will today be its mighty minority leader in Parliament. And to the students who are on various campuses, it doesn't matter whether you are from the smallest tribe. This tradition, honest industry, hard work, and nature science. Let no one lie to you and tell you that the NPP tradition is for a small tribe. That is not who we are. This tradition I've spoken of today is worth dying for. It's the reason our elders sacrificed their all for this tradition. It is your time to sacrifice for this tradition and make it better. To our broader Ghanaian society, the legacy of this tradition does not live in the prestige of its prominent members. It lives in the 3.5 million young people who went to secondary school, who might otherwise have stayed home. It lives in the family that visited a clinic with the NHIS card. It lives in the worker in a district where there is a factory created by the initiative introduced by Nana and Grandpa Kufuor. It lives in a farmer who doubled their yield with free inputs. The cocoa farmer who, in spite of market volatilities, did not receive a haircut under Kufuor and Akufo-Addo. Each initiative, he will prosper. These are the quiet, powerful, destiny-changing interventions that define what this tradition truly is. Not a philosophy of a few. A philosophy of the many. On the march towards ownership, toward opportunity, toward the full realization of what it means to be a citizen of Ghana. Danquah was right. The fire of freedom is unquenchable in the hearts of men and women. It was unquenchable in his heart, in Dombo's heart, in Busia's heart. It is unquenchable in the hearts of the millions who have benefited from the government of this tradition. And it will remain unquenchable in the hearts of the generation to come if we give them the education, the health, the skills, and the institutions that they need, and the freedom to let that fire burn. If Ghana's futures, if Ghana's development path is to remain anchored in constitutional governance, productive enterprise, and broad-based ownership of opportunity, then the intellectual framework examined today will remain central to the national conversation. That is the mission. That is the legacy. That is that work that remains with us. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Another round of applause for God standing. Wow. Don't worry, IERPP is so minded of what you are doing. We've made enough provision for everybody to bring a fast year. So please, the assistants of the various invited dignitaries will go to the room on my right and then bring that into the back of this day. Please permit me to acknowledge the presence of the beloved wife of the leader of the mighty minority, Mrs. Diane from Markin. Thank you very much. That was a surprise, right? All right. We also have in our presence Honorable Francis Asenso-Boachi, Member of Parliament for Bantuma, former Deputy Chief of Staff, former Minister for Works and Housing. We also have Ambassador Fawaz Aliu, former Deputy Chief of Staff in our midst here. Fawaz is here. Thank you very much. And coincidentally, we have 3 former Ministers of Information in our midst. I don't know how that thing happened, but we have in our midst, let me start from the youngest. Honorable Fatima Jobaka, okay, she's here. I don't have Kodoko, where is he? He's gone out. Okay, a lot of stars and it's happening on him. Okay, and they also have in our presence Lady O and Kufuor. Wow. Wow. We also have in our midst Honorable Ampertun Sakon, Member of Parliament for Mampong. Deputy General Secretary of the NPP, Dr. Antoinette Tibudaku is also here. Henry Nana Boachi is also in our midst. Nana B, NPP National Organizer. And from the office of the NPP flag bearer, we have Dr. Namibe here. We have Kufuor also around. Then we have Ellen Amadi also here. Please, let's bring your list. Okay. Let's have a short portrait performance from Mr. Osei Kwanchi from University of Ghana, a teacher.
Excellency, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, who says I'm going to summarize anything? I'm not going to summarize because what did I take from this lecture? I think to my grandchildren there, it tells you that the central right agenda is also people-centered. It does not, and I repeat, it does not take out anybody. It can combine all the benefits. And this lecture, for me, has opened, not spoken, but has opened your eyes, and I believe you will go home understanding that something was done. But as far as I'm concerned, I'd like to thank again the Institute for putting this together and to ask you to continue, because at the end of the day, we need to let the nation understand what has been done. We need to make sure that there are issues that we can certify with facts and figures as has been done by the Osami. I know that Osa means war, or he means chief. I don't know whether it's a war chief or warlord, whatever it is, he has specifically put down on paper as a starter, because this is not going to be the end. As a nation, we can't just take things lead by lead, but we must continue. So I'd like to thank you all for coming. I am not trying to summarize anything, but to say that Kufuor Osami and my good friends, and sometimes I tell you my little brother, the former president, that we appreciate his coming here. We were waiting for you. For the first time in Nigerian history, for the most of these things that I've been attending, normally the guests of honor will keep us waiting for about half an hour, 1 hour. But here, exactly when I got here, before, they were looking for me, so I was sitting in my cabinet, because I know I had not expected people to come before. And you came, so I thought being the work of the one who should be thanking you, but I was pleased that you were here. And all my colleagues and friends, thank you very much for coming. And I believe that Osahi, the warlord, or the old master, would also develop this thing that we have done in accordance with the institute. And in the fullness of time, there will be yet another lecture which will explain this thing further and further. It's about time that the center-right agenda got a bit more aggressive, got a bit more open, and let people understand what they are capable of doing. Because when I sit down, as an 84-year-old man, I don't think that any government has done as much for the individual, for the households, as the center-right tradition has done in this nation. Thank you very much. On that note, MC, thank you very much. I'll see you again the next time. I'll be here. I won't be chairman, but I'll be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Council Chairman. Thank you very much, Council Chairman. We are bringing the series to a close. Maybe the next 3 weeks or a month time, we are going to have another series of Kojo Opo, Kroma, Megaro Abdurrahman, give us the closing prayer, please.
And so before I pray, though, I would ask that we'll contest myself and my brother. We are contesting that we are taking the thing to the north. Yes, the second time, not the third series will go to the north.
If Honorable Farouk is going to sponsor, we can go tomorrow. Are you ready? Okay, Director.
So, Alhamdulillah, we pray for long life, prosperity for former President, His Excellency Danquah-Busia. We pray for our chairman. We pray for all the elderly people, long life, for he has been here all this time. It's been close to 3 hours. So we pray for long life for all of them. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة. لله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض وإن تبدوا ما في أنفسكم وتخفوه يحاسبكم بما أنزل إلينا من ربه والمؤمنين كلنا آمن بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله لا نفرق بين أحد من رسله وقالوا سمعنا وأطعنا غفرانك ربنا وإليك المصير. ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا أو أخطأنا ربنا ولا تحمل علينا إصرا كما حملته على الذين من قبلنا ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا أنت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. We pray that 2028 inshallah 2028 inshallah His Excellency Al-Haji Dr. Muhammadu Awuya will be the next president of the Republic. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Please, all students, yes, all students are invited to remain seated. Your Excellency, for daughters, we plead with you that you come outside for a photo opportunity. We've set it outside, but there's darkness over there, so we could do it here. Yes, please. So come and join His Excellency up here so that we can take a picture before we step out. Please, all students should remain seated. Please. So, the Executive Director of IERPP, the management members, research fellows, together with members of Parliament. Firstly, please join the General Secretary, National Organizer of IERPP, Dr. T.B. Dako, former members of Parliament, former that point, please go. I think it's too wide. It's okay. Okay. Are you okay?
Don't want you to get
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Please, students remain seated. All the individuals are supposed to use the door on my right behind me here to pass through.
Are you ready? This way, this way. This way.
Respectfully, all dignitaries are supposed to use the door right behind me on my right. Students, please remain seated. Oh, Socrates. Ah, where were you hiding? Caught what?
Mr. President, he is going to the element. Yeah, in November. That we are going there.
Yes, please.
You know, member of the city. I do.
Show on.
Let's go. Not to myself, so what? Yeah, right. Radina Akuffo, honest questions you have to get. The war something ready. Not to myself.
I don't know why they go on to Charlie.
Yeah, one back.
Hi, Ellen.
Okay, Wednesday I'll be just okay, well, let me from that Monday. Oh, sure.
Why 2 million?
Oh, yes. But you took me to the
So that's Honorable Afenyo Markin taking pictures with the students that came
Shall we have all the students? Shall we have all the students seated?
Put one plus one.
GN 1925, the blogging subsidiary. GN 1925, 10. GN 1925, 10. GN 1925, 23. Okay. GN 1925, 23.
Champion leader. Champion leader.
Like I'm from this man or somebody from them.
Champion leader. Do the do. Yeah, what's up? Oh, God.